Well, good afternoon and welcome to Florida Repertory Theater's Stage at Home virtual talkback for Friday, June 12th, 2020. My name is Jason Parrish. I'm your Associate Artistic Director and your host for the afternoon. So this afternoon, I want to begin with an update about Stage at Home. Today is our 10th week anniversary, and it's been an exciting experience for everyone involved. But all good things must come to an end, so after today, I wanted to let our viewers know that there will be 2 more broadcasts to finish out the month of June before we take a hiatus for the month of July. As a staff, we need to focus on some other projects for the summer months and direct our resources to our eventual reopening. So at the end of today's show, I'll let you know what we have in store for you next week. So thank you all, our loyal viewers, for making this such an informative and thought-provoking project. It lasted longer than I certainly imagined, and that is because of you. So I hope these talks help to enhance your experience when we're able to gather again and see a show in the arcade. For today, whether you're Zooming in with us, watching on Facebook, or listening to our podcast, welcome to the discussion. So back in 2018, Florida Rep produced the American classic, The Miracle Worker by William Gibson. It's the story of how Annie Sullivan met a young Helen Keller and made a life-altering breakthrough that would help young Helen, who was blind and deaf from infancy, learn to communicate with the outside world. It's a story we all learn at a young age. The play is famous and the film is iconic. Our panel today consists of 3 remarkable women of the theater who helped to bring that story to life on our stage and to bring those fabled characters to rich and vivid life for you, our audience. Ensemble member Maureen Heffernan directed the play. Betsy Hogg played Annie Sullivan, and Liza Longenhagen played Helen Keller at the age of 10. She's 13 now. Also on the call today is Greg Longenhagen, our artistic director and an ensemble actor and director. And back in the winter of 2018, Greg served on the creative team as the fight director, and we'll get to know what that means in just a little bit. So Maureen, Betsy, Liza, and Greg, welcome to Stage at Home. So we'll begin today, as we always do, with introductions, and then we'll dive into what it took to bring these characters to life and what it took to bring this play to life. Maureen, we'll start with you. You've sort of become a household name at Florida Rep. So if you wouldn't mind starting us off and tell us, when did you come to Florida Rep for the first time, and what plays have you directed since? And then, tell us also what you do in New Jersey and what you're doing now. So Maureen.
Okay, hi everybody. Let me start with when I came to Florida Rep. I came to Florida Rep in 2000 or 2001. I think I split that year. It was the second year of the Rep. And on my first day there, I met Greg Longenhagen and John Felix, who are in this picture. And it was an interesting, exciting time for me because I met these men that I'd never met before, and then set into rehearsal. And we had a great time, and full of the kind of adventures that happen in the theater when it's its first year. I then returned to do All My Sons. Again, I did that with Greg. Then I did Masterclass. And then in 2007, I came to do Rabbit Hole. And got the opportunity to work with Michelle and Rachel, which was and Carrie.
And if you don't mind me adding to the discussion, so because many of our audiences know them, there are 2 people whose first experience at the Rep who are now ensemble members had with you. Michelle D'Amato's first show was Rabbit Hole, and later on we'll talk about Patricia Idlett. But anyway, sorry to interrupt. Rabbit Hole in 2007.
Right, and it was an interesting time, and we were dealing with the death of a child, and during that time, one of our people in the production staff actually lost a child. So it really brought it home for all of us that were working at that time. It was a great play. It's a moving drama, but it's also very funny. Then I got to come back and do Doubt, and I met Lisa Morgan and Patricia Idlett, and that was fantastic. And I say about that play that it brought my mother and father to Florida Rep for the first time, and they argued the entire way to my aunt and uncles about whether or not the priest was guilty. But having met Lisa and worked with Rachel and worked with Brendan, that's when I met Brendan. The following year, we were able to do a production of Dancing at Liza. And that was the first time that the Wall Street Journal, I believe, was down there.
Yeah, it was.
It was a wonderful ensemble piece that had so many people. people that were real favorites and continue to be favorites, including Peter Thomason, including, of course, Chris Clavelli, and it was a beautiful, and one of my favorite collaborators, Ray Reck, with the set. So we had a beautiful time, and then I was invited back to do Opus, and Opus was an interesting new play. It was just out then, about what it means to be an artist in the world. What do you owe to an ensemble? What do you owe to yourself? So we had that adventure, and after Opus, I did Sylvia in 2011, which was great, and we were again lauded in the Wall Street Journal, and I was able to do one of the first productions that were done in the studio before it was the studio theater, The Year of Magical Thinking with Sarah Morrissey. That's when I met Sarah, and it was, what a wonderful actress, which is what's happened for me in every one of the plays I've done. This is Craig Bockhorn, and Peter and Sarah, and getting a chance to do Little Foxes, which is really an American classic, and has so much to do with the kind of issues that we still face today. We really looked at those. So that was another one that we received the Wall Street Journal. Patricia was in that, and between Dancing at Luna and Little Foxes, I really came to appreciate the power of working with a repertory of actors. I knew these folks, I'd seen them work, I'd worked with them, and we really knew what we could get from one another. In 2017, I got the chance to do Double Wide, which was a premiere play. I had seen it at the workshop, and Jason graciously reached out to me and said, I think this is a play you might have some understanding of and affinity for, and I certainly did. And met Craig then, I met Greg and saw his wonderful work. And then most recently, I did Patsy Cline, and that was, got to work with Bethany and Becky, and work on a singer that I'd long admired. I dedicated that performance to my mom, because she was the one who would play Patsy Cline on the radio when I was a little kid, before I knew who she was. So my time with Florida Rep, it really is, I consider it an artistic home for me, and certainly a family of artists that I love and admire, and a group of subscribers that I'm very cognizant of and appreciative of for all they bring to the process.
Well, thank you, Maureen, and we'll get back in a little bit to talk about what it is you do in New Jersey as the discussion continues. Liza, our main stage audiences, they may know you from a number of professional season productions, but that's not where you started on our stages. So if you wouldn't mind telling me, when did your career as a performer and a child actor begin at Florida Rep, and also tell us what grade you're going into and where you go to school?
I began acting when I was 5 years old. My first show was 42nd Street. It was a summer camp in 2012, and I was a little New Yorker, and I was the smallest one in that show. It was such a fun show, though. I loved it. I'm going into 8th grade at the Sanibel School. I was in Journey to Oz.
Well, yeah, Journey to Oz was our play lab, and you got called up from the audience, so we have these pictures of you as our first Dorothy in that world premiere. And other camp shows. So if you wouldn't mind also talking about what the summer camp experience was like.
Well, my first one, 42nd Street, obviously, that was a game changer for me. I fell in love with acting at that point, and I knew this is what I wanted to continue doing every summer, and just do it as much as I could.
The camps were a lot of fun for her, and you really didn't have a role per se,
No.
like she was ensemble, I think, almost every year until you did Veruca Salt, which you're looking at right now. So she was a little older, and she had already done 2 main stage shows by this time, I think.
Right. And for those who don't know, Liz Abbott is Liza's mother. So hi, Liz. Welcome to the discussion. I'm sorry I didn't introduce you at the beginning.
That's okay. That's okay.
And then also, Liza, you have had the wonderful experiences of playing some iconic roles for us in addition to Helen Keller. Here's To Kill a Mockingbird the year before it.
This is my first professional show, and this was such a good I didn't know I had the ability to do anything like this, but it was such an amazing experience.
Yeah, it was remarkable to see you do it. So thank you. And here, your mother's favorite picture of you. Excellent. Thank you all so very much. Liza, we'll get back to you in a moment. I also have pictures, of course. Here you are in A Christmas Carol, which came a little the next year. So if you want to talk to us about that project, working with Mark Shanahan and some of our ensemble members again.
It had a lot of kids in it as well. Working with kids in a professional production, I think was amazing. There would be so many amazing.
Yeah, I think it was the first time she really got to work with a lot more people on stage, where the other shows she had worked individually with maybe 2 people at a time, and this one they were huge scenes where people were singing, and it was a much different experience.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, and we'll dive into to Miracle Worker obviously in just a little bit. I wanted to move next to Betsy, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself to us and telling us a bit about your career, both before Florida Rep and what brought you here and what you've been doing since.
Sure. I'm Betsy Hogg, and I also have been acting since I was very young. I started at a local theater camp when I was 9. So very similar origin story to Liza, though she got a bit of a jump on me at 5. But so I started acting when I was 9 in Ohio. I grew up in Shaker Heights, and I fell in love with it, and I kept doing it, and I still do. These are pictures from the closing night curtain call of Peter and the Starcatcher, which was a show that I was extremely lucky to be a part of. When it made the move from New York Theater Workshop to Broadway, they had understudies for the first time, and so I understudied Celia Keenan-Bolger, who played Molly Astor, and I was lucky enough to take over the role for the end of the run. So I'm there with Adam and Matt, and I think, is that Kevin? Yes.
I think it is, Kevin.
Flagula. And so it was a wonderful experience. It's a beautiful play. It's an incredible role for one woman among a company of men, and she is the superhero. And so that was a really joyous experience, and I got to work with so many great people that I've kept in my life. This is from Speech and Debate at Barrington Stage Company, which is an incredible play by Stephen Karam that I have loved for a really long time. My good friend Sarah Steele was in the original production at Roundabout, and so I got to see that production, and I actually directed this play when I was in college. It's one of the only plays I've ever directed. And then, because I can't grow old, when I played the role of Jawada, who is 17, a couple of years ago when I was not 17, but it was thrilling.
And I have some other things here that I pulled just to make sure our audiences understand that you're a freelance professional actor. You're based in New York, but you work all over the place.
Exactly, yes. I've gotten to go all over. Dorset is in Vermont. I was there last summer. If anybody has the opportunity to go to Vermont for a summer for any reason, strongly recommend. It's beautiful. And the theater is incredible. I got to work on a world premiere of a play by Heidi Armbruster. That's what those pictures were from. And then this is from the play that I did most recently, which was at Gulf Shore Playhouse in Naples, so not too far from you guys. And I was there until March. We ended up closing on March 14th, one day short of when our run was meant to close on the 15th. Because, the world changed. But before that, I got to get dressed up and do this play for a couple of months, which was really exciting.
And so obviously you played Annie Sullivan for, and if you wouldn't mind talking about, being a child actor and who you are in the time of Christine Brody opposite Cynthia Nixon.
Yes.
So I thought it was particularly poignant for today that we're here talking with Liza, and the two of you had very similar beginnings.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, so another thing that might interest people is this was actually, I did The Miracle Worker twice in just over a year. This is the other production that I did first in Queens. And one of the things that I found invaluable in both cases was you're working so closely with young people who have to take on so much. They carry so much weight in this play. I mean, it's Helen's story, and it's basically like a graduate acting exercise, asking somebody to inhabit a world where they can't see and they can't hear, and how to live in that world and share it with the audience is like, I don't know that I could do that. I'm very lucky that was not my job. But I do think that coming from a background of acting with adults as a child and having a little bit of an understanding of the language that you use and how you communicate helped me form relationships with both Liza and with Ayla, who is the other Helen that I worked with.
Right.
Yeah.
I wanted to, before we dive in, Maureen, I'm going to go to you next and ask you how you began your prep, and if you could walk us through what you did with these two actresses the week before we started rehearsals. But I wanted to make a particular mention. I wanted to thank Maura Chippendale, who is in the audience today, I believe somewhere on our Zoom call. Chippendale Audiology generously sponsored a signed performance of Miracle Worker during the run, which featured interpreters from the Sally J. Pimentel Deaf and Hard of Hearing Center, Mike Brust, the orientation and mobility specialist from Lighthouse, Southwest Florida, which is an organization for the visually impaired. He joined us for a few rehearsals to watch how Liza moved and about how she undertook tasks. And I just wanted to make special mention of those people who helped us back in 2018 as we got this production underway. And a shout out to Maura, who's on this call. So Maureen, if you wouldn't mind telling us a bit about how you prepped for this as a director, and then how you approached this when you came to work with Liza, who was 10, and Betsy as they took on these roles. Let's unmute you real fast. One sec. We'll unmute you, Maureen. There you are.
Do it myself. All right. Well, I wanted to say my preparation for Miracle Worker was a long time, because the first play I was ever in was Miracle Worker, and I played neither Annie nor Helen. I played Jayne when I was 15. So I knew the play and I loved the play, and I wanted to direct it for a long time. So I was thrilled with the book. One of the things that it has a lot of connections to me. One thing I have to say, when we went to school for the blind, my sister was a teacher, a mobility trainer of visually impaired children. So I've been to her classroom a number of times. But I remember in my first conversation with Betsy, because of undue circumstances, I never met Betsy in person. We met on the phone. And one of the first things that we both talked about was, I was ready to come in really strong with my feelings about what was the obligation of the directors and Annie to the young people that were in it, because it's Liza first of all, but then it was all the other ones. But before I could get that out, she said to me, one of the things I feel really strongly about is how the young people are treated. That this is not just an opportunity for us to direct them. We expect certainly professional behavior and professional attention, but they are young people that are going to school and doing things. And so we were very simpatico on that right away. So I thought that was a good sign. Liza, I've known since she was born. So I knew how what a strong young performer she was. I will say this and embarrass you, I hope, or not, Liza, but I brought down for Christmas a karaoke machine. And I think I did that most to see if I could aggravate her parents, but she loved it. And she didn't remember that it was me when I saw her like 2 years later, but she remembered the machine. She brought it out to film me. So that being said, I've done a lot of work with people with disabilities, and it's a strong passion of mine. I've been called the Cultural Access Network. I'm the steering committee for 25 years in New Jersey, with the idea of providing access to people with a wide range of challenges. So I was thrilled when we were invited to go to the school, because I knew that would be the best thing in the world for both of these people to experience, and myself to just watch. I had certainly been with visually impaired people for a part of my life, on and off, but there's so many things you don't know, and I wanted to watch the teachers and how they work. So when we got down there, it was great.
So let me
gave us. Oh yeah, sure.
I was going to say, just for our audiences, we Liza and Betsy spent the first week before rehearsals with Maureen, and one of the things they did is went to the Fort Myers School for the Deaf and Blind. So if you wouldn't mind also, Liza, if you'll jump in, and Betsy, also tell us a bit about your experience going to that school, and Maureen, if you want to join us as well too, but I want to give Liza a chance to tell us a bit about her experience.
It was actually in St. Augustine, not in Fort
Oh,
Myers.
I'm so sorry, St. Augustine.
It was truly an incredible experience. I've never felt something as incredible as that. We went up there in January, and we got to tour, I think, almost the entire campus.
Right.
It was so cool.
We were trying, I think Maureen had set up the fact that we kind of wanted to be with kids around Liza's age. But the school had ages, K through, in fact, pre-kindergarten, all the way through graduation in high school. But you mostly were around kids roughly around her age.
Oh yes, and they did let us borrow their kind of effects. So
Yeah, we forgot to give them back.
I hope they're watching.
But Liza actually got to wear these, and we brought them home so she could eat in them,
walk around.
do chores in them, things around the house. There's Maureen wearing them as well. And these are actually really cool because they are not completely opaque. This one was, I think, the one Maureen's wearing is diabetic retinopathy. So it gives you an actual, this is something they did with the parents. When the parents would come in, they would show the parents what their kids were seeing. So you were able to put these on. I forget what this one is, but they're partial blindness. They're not completely opaque, but the one Liza's wearing, the Mindful, was total darkness, which is what Helen saw. I guess in the beginning she saw a little bit of light, but later she wore this. And what we did learn when we were there were most of the kids poke at their eyes and push in their eyes to get those flashes of light. If they're in total darkness, they like to push their eyeballs in to kind of generate those little flashes of light quite often. We learned so much. I mean, it was incredible.
Betsy, what did the experience do for you as an actress? And how was it applicable to Annie in addition to her being Helen's teacher?
Yeah, well, one of the things that is interesting about Annie Sullivan that I think a lot of people forget is that she too had extreme trouble seeing. She had, I think, 9 surgeries on her eyes. She was temporarily completely blind. By the time she was working with Helen, she could see, but it was very difficult, and largely she could see outlines of things. She had to read really close to her face. And so those goggles that sort of simulated impaired vision were helpful because, Annie was also not operating with all of the functions that I have. And so that was really informative. The other thing that I thought was really cool is what we were really seeing at the school is all of the innovations that have happened in communication in the time since this moment that this play focuses on with Annie and Helen. They were trying to figure something out that had never been figured out before. And the fact that they did it and that they shared it and spoke about it has led to now a world where people who face similar difficulties have the skills to communicate and live full lives in the world in a way that might not have been the case if this sort of messy relationship hadn't turned into what it did.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. And so, Maureen, as a director, what was it that you were looking for in heading to the school for that week?
Well, one of the things, well, first of all, I did want to see Betsy and Liza begin to form a union together when they were looking at it. So I tried to stay back and let them do, but I was very interested in things like how are the children eating, how are they moving in the halls, and particularly exploring, you know, the goggles that you see that I had on were the ones that had much more of what Betsy was referring to of Annie's vision. That, you know, like slight shadows and some light, because, you know, I was very cognizant of the fact of this young woman entering into this life. And I think that, you know, it's, you know, there's a reason why it's called The Miracle Worker. It is Helen's story and we root for Helen, but Annie moves that play. You know, Annie motivates that play. So that idea of what did it feel like for her to get on that train? What does it feel like for her to be at that dinner? What does it feel like? So I think that there were things that, you know, I felt very close to Helen and, you know, as people do, and you know that. But I was very intrigued with Annie on this, and particularly, you know, one of the questions that I asked Betsy when I first met her is, you've just done this. Why did you want to do it again, and what do you hope you can get this time? You know, what do you hope you can get? Because I think that's important for a director to serve that. As I said, you know, I've known Liza, so I was very thrilled with the fact that I knew that she'd take a deep leap, you know, and that she would really go for it. That I admire that about Liza is, you know, her courage. And I spent a little time with Liza saying, you know, I'm encouraging you. And usually when you're in 5th grade or 4th grade, people are sort of telling you to be a little quiet around adults. I want you to speak your mind. If you need something and you're not getting it, really participate in this rehearsal room. And when the other kids are around, you have a chance to be a kid. But when you're here, I want to make sure, I don't want you to feel like a little princess that's being protected. I want you to have, you know, discussions. And she really did. She took that seriously. And we would do a lot of check-ins. But we walked one really intriguing for me. One was going to lunch and watching how people functioned during lunch, how they ate, what they didn't eat, how they chose things, people that ate dessert first, how they put the trays down. You know, it's all kid behavior, but it's kid behavior when you're dealing with different sensory things. And the other thing was what was intriguing but didn't necessarily feed the play as much was going to the dance class where you saw the three of us and you were looking at the dance class, because that was a mixed blind and deaf dance class. And my praise for that teacher, and it is for, you know, for Annie too, working blind deaf is a whole nother thing than working deaf or working, you know, with blind or visually impaired. I've done a lot of those things separately. I had a blind deaf kid in a workshop that I was teaching. I was like, oh my God, what do I do, and what are the things? And that idea of moving through the sense of touch, you hear Annie's inner monologue, you know, she speaks it out loud, but that idea of how do I touch you, how do I make you safe, how do I communicate, it's an enormous, profound journey that we see happen. And again, for Liza as Helen, emerging from darkness, every kind of darkness, you know, including Darkness of the Soul, because so those two things coming together was what was most intriguing, and watching them, seeing how they were together.
Betsy,
I hope that
Liza.
answers.
Oh, of course it does. Liza and Betsy, if you wouldn't mind answering, telling us a bit about rehearsing this play. Betsy, how is this play? I mean, it's obvious to us how it's different, certainly for the actors playing Helen, but how is rehearsing this play different, more challenging than rehearsing a play that doesn't have these extra pieces to put on it? And Greg, I'll go to you after this to talk a bit about what it was to be movement director and play. So Betsy, Liza?
Yeah, I would say one of the main differences or unique things about this play is the physical relationship between Annie and Helen. There are pages of this script that are just stage directions of combat. There's a lot of fighting in this play because before the end, before the language is actually shared, there's a lot of miscommunication, and the only tool that they have is their bodies. So there's a huge kitchen fight. Here we go. There's a lot of fighting. And Helen is does not start off the play as being super nice. So one of the tricky things to balance is, you know, Liza's awesome and she's super smart and we got along really well. And that's really important as actors for the relationship of the play. But then you have to turn that comfort with each other into an ability to not be nice to each other in the course of the play.
Right. Liza, tell us what it was like for you rehearsing a play that had so much physicality in it, especially when you had to be convincing about that you weren't seeing or hearing anything. And had you had any experience with stage combat before, Liza?
I've not really had that experience before. It was kind of hard being so mean on stage and just so physical. There were so many safety precautions. I know every rehearsal was putting on knee pads, elbow pads, taking so many safety precautions.
Oh, we lost a little bit of your audio. So say again about elbow pads and knee pads.
We had to take so many safety precautions to make sure everything was running smoothly and everything was safe and that everything was
Excellent.
Can I add one thing, Jason, before?
Yes, of course you can. Of course you can.
One of the things that I think was exciting and wonderful and such a gift from the rep, but the idea of starting with these two ladies who are locked in this world, you know, before the other people entered, that was a different kind of experience for me. We didn't start at the play. We started in sort of the center of the play with just them. We started with those meetings, all those individual scenes. So those relationships were being built in that week. And it was a little funny or odd when the other people joined us. We were like doing this play, you know, and so I think that was an exciting thing that I hadn't particularly done before. Had that opportunity to work a play in a spiral.
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that.
As Liza's mom, I remember when you did let in the rest of the cast into that process, Maureen, and you were so good about this because Liza was then going to start working with other children that were her peers, some of which she knew and some she didn't. But for instance, one of the girls that you just saw, she had to physically stab with scissors, you know, on stage, and so she was really working with these kids, you know, thing. Anyway, that was a whole new relationship in itself because she and Maureen and Betsy had been so close to one another for 2 weeks already. So you were so mindful of her relationship with her adolescent peers.
Right. Thank you so much. And just so our audience knows, Florida Rep rehearses its main stage shows for 3 full weeks. At the end of 3 weeks, we start the technical process and add in the costumes and sets and lighting. But for this show, we brought Liza and Betsy in a little early, I think a whole week early, so that they could go to the school up in St. Augustine, and then they were able to rehearse just by themselves because it was so much of just the two of them. Greg, I'll bring you into the talk now so that you can tell us a bit about how you approached it. And as a fight director, you were part of the process from the very beginning. So tell us a bit about what that role is on a play like this.
Well, first off, let me say this. I mean, it was a wonderful room to work in. I've worked with Maureen on so many productions in so many different ways. And one thing that Maureen always does, and anybody who's worked with Maureen knows, is that you really feel like you're welcomed into the room. You really feel that when you come into that rehearsal room, you have the ability to explore without being judged. You know, Maureen is the consummate collaborator, and I just want to say that when you're going into a room like this as a fight choreographer, to know that ahead of time is really exciting. This was a show where I knew, you know, what we didn't want to do was what I didn't want to do was try and reinvent the wheel, so to speak. I knew that Betsy had done this before and had probably had a lot of this in her muscle memory in terms of some of these beats that are in here. Much of the action, if you will, the choreography is dictated by the script. It's dictated by the dialogue in the script. So to veer too far from it at the beginning, it would be a mistake. So I knew, you know, when we got into this, that we were going to try and, you know, stick to the ABCs of it all as much as we could, and then we could explore from there what was necessary to flesh out the fight, if you will, to make it, you know, vibrant and dynamic. First thing we always start with in a room, and this might be interesting for our people on the call, is, you know, you see all these steps, and you see, you know, there is Liza grabbing Betsy's hair, and we basically work out all of these types of things in slow motion. And ladies, if you guys remember, you know, we just, you know, it was slow. It's all slow motion. It's a safety first kind of a thing. And it's really about, if you can do it, all of the separate little beats of the fight, all the tiny little beats, if you can do them slow and and do them dynamically, but in the correct succession to one another, you can always speed it up. So we always start slow, and really we never really get to what is performance speed, which is never full speed. It's called 3/4 speed or performance speed, until we get close to opening. And it was a dream to work with my daughter, who I not only love, I actually really like. Liz and I actually like our kids. We really do like our children as much as we.
The feeling used to be mutual.
So you know, that was fun. And Betsy is such a consummate pro, and Maureen is, she knows when to let you do your work. You know, she's not over your shoulder doing that. She knows that she's got to give you room and time, because Maureen is very patient with stuff like this. And with these types of very intricate work, you have to have patience, and you have to have patience for your fighters. And that's what these guys were. They were fighters on stage, and and the more that, you know, I'll say this as a fight choreographer, the sloppier the work appears to the audience, the sloppier and dirtier the fight looks in terms of it being kind of a mess, the more difficult it is to choreograph. It's more difficult to choreograph this kind of a fight than it is to choreograph something that's John Wayne punching somebody else in the ballroom kind of thing. But it was a great experience, and I was so grateful to and honored to be a part of it.
So what does it take, Betsy, Liza, what does it take to do this? First of all, what does it take to rehearse something like this? How many hours do you think you spent trying to perfect it in slow motion in order to get it so that you could do it at show speed? And then doing it 8 times a week, you had to do this fight 8 times a week and stay safe.
Well, I'll say, first of all, There is a pleasure I can't explain, the joy of watching a father teach his daughter to throw a fake punch. Like, I cannot tell you how joyous that was. It was beautiful, with such care. It was really incredible. But in terms of the time that goes into it, so much of our rehearsal time was devoted to this. We would have a chunk of time every day where we were either building part of the fight or reviewing things. And people always ask about, you know, how you learn all those lines. Learning a sequence of action that's completely unrelated to language, where there are no lines, where you just have to remember what comes next, presents a lot of, I think, greater challenges than just, you know, being able to talk to the person that you're sharing the stage with. So we spent a lot of time making sure that we knew that. And also we got to a point where we knew so much what needed to happen for the story that even if something went wrong in some way, if some little step was skipped, we were able to safely together move forward. And that was just born out of time and patience and working together.
Or Liza, do you have anything you want to add about the physicality of these fights, or learning the choreography from your dad? Anything?
I'm impatient. Those are definitely the two things that you really need with this kind of fight. It was great having another week with Betsy because we needed to build that relationship, to have that stage chemistry, and just get more comfortable with the fact that it's not going to be like cupcakes and rainbows the whole show. And
muscle memory was something that I think Greg was trying to really encourage you to just keep repeating, and at home just, you know, really trying to do things without looking at the action of what was happening. So, you know, we were blindfolding her at home quite a bit.
also, there were some times where it didn't go as planned, and you just have to react the way and just keep going with that.
Sure. We had a question on Facebook just as we started this discussion, so I wanted to shout out to Andrew Evans on Facebook, who just as we started to talk about the fight choreography, we answered all of his questions. So Andrew, I hope that answers your question about the physical altercations. Maureen, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I wanted to say two-part thing. One of which is, I think one of the challenges for these guys is that you can't rehearse by yourself, you know, the fight. Like, you can go home and learn your own lines and go over your blocking, but you can't do your fight by yourself. So we really had to give that time. And the other thing is, and I hope I was patient with this, is that there's time when actors can't do it anymore. And often directors push them past that time. And it was really like to watch, and I said to those guys, as did Greg all the time, you got to tell us when it's time to stop. Because if you push through that, that's when people get hurt, because you get tired, you know. And the other thing I wanted to say is these guys were so great with each other and spent that time, that one of the hardest things we had to do was with the other young lady who Liza had to try to stab, who had to act afraid but not be afraid of Liza. And
Right.
then the little boy had to pull her off. We spent hours on that. It's like a 5-second thing. And we spent hours on it till people felt completely safe. And Liza did not want to stab her, and we were like, that's what it calls for, and it doesn't, you know, so it was a really scary thing. And I think the other thing that Greg mentioned is that the choreography is very specific and you have to find it. On the other hand, as much as we did follow guidelines of the set design, the Florida rep is not like a New York space. So like how you get them on and off for these things, we had to come up with some wild solutions. Like, you know, like she has to go backwards so she's closer to the door when the backup goes. Or they have to, or the eggs can't go this way, they have to go this way or they'll be in the audience's lap. So that was interesting as you try and follow this map to go, oh, we can't go there. So.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing up the other young people in the show. As you saw, there was a whole host of young actresses and actors. Shout out to Mariana Young, who played the girl who ended up almost getting stabbed. So thank you, Mariana, for being a good sport. And Keenan Jackson, who every night also sort of took a beating.
Wow. Right?
Yeah, I believe so. And you know, the great thing about Florida Rep and our education program is that when we have young roles to cast like this, we go to our education programs first. And I'll say, as the person who is casting this play, we saw some candidates for Helen Keller in New York City. But the interesting thing was they had the same experience as Liza and all of our young people did. They just came from theater companies like us in the Northeast. So the actors we were getting were the same actors that were right here in our backyard. It was the same crop of people with the same sort of, young people with the same sort of experience. So it became a no-brainer. You know, obviously we looked here first and we looked in New York and we compared the pools, but Liza and everyone who was in this show just had great experience, and a lot of them are still doing theater and are still in our summer camps and are still doing our conservatory shows. So
Liza and Keenan had a relationship from To Kill a Mockingbird.
oh, sure.
And I think one night in the cottage on stage, we were just talking about this. Keenan actually rolled over, I guess, and tied Liza's shoe during Miracle Worker because he could tell that her shoe had come undone. And I thought that was so dear because they had already built a friendship for years, you know, previous. But I think he saw, oh my gosh, Liza's shoe's come undone. I better tie that shoe for her so she doesn't trip on stage.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, thank you, Keenan, for tying her shoe.
Yes.
We have just a reminder to our panel on Zoom. If you have a question, you can put it in the chat window. For those of you on Facebook, you are more than welcome to put a question in the comments. So if you have a question, please type it in the chat. Linda asks if this performance was taped and was it possible to view online. The answer is we do film an archive. However, we're not allowed to post it for future viewing, but we did a promo video from it. So perhaps one of us, after this, I'll email you a link to watch a little bit of the promo, but we're sorry you missed it. A couple of other questions I have. Liza, I know you wanted to tell us stories, you know, as much as you rehearsed. We heard about how you rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed, but sometimes things do go wrong. I know that there was a knocked over glass, and I know that one night we almost didn't get you on stage. What was that about?
Oh, so the night.
I don't think it was opening.
Okay. It was one of the nights. No, it was a Sunday matinee. I remember that.
I'm not sure. It's
I remember being there to give a curtain speech, so for whatever that is, I was back there trying to bust the door open. I do remember that.
yeah.
So I got into one of the dustbins to all my cats were not good. I'm just looking. And I was giving to my friends, and somebody shut the door out. And it was.
They called 5, and they were all hugging in the big dressing room with all the children. And somebody accidentally shut the door. And then it was called for places, and they could not.
And I tried to open the door.
The doorknob had broken, and they got trapped in that room, and we had to knock the door down in order to get them out.
I forgot about that until this moment.
Betsy, what was it like for you? Were you worried that we weren't going to go on?
I completely blocked it out, so I think it must have been more traumatic than I thought. Because I remember it very clearly now that you're mentioning it, but I never would have cited that as one of the things that happened during the run of the show. Yeah, it was a high-stress day.
Betsy, how do you think, changing subject slightly, how do you think your having been an actor as a young person informs an experience like this?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think the biggest thing is that I remember what it was like, and you know, young people are very aware of how they're being treated, and you know, if they're being talked down to, if they're being ignored. And so I've always just wanted, and I felt as a young actor that I was given a lot of respect and that I was listened to, and so it was really important to me to hopefully create a similar environment where, you know, we're scene partners, we're collaborators. The fact that we're at different, you know, points in our lives doesn't mean that we aren't sharing that space together with equal weight. So I think, I don't know if I would think as much that way if I hadn't been in that position when I was that age.
Absolutely. Liza, I wanted to ask you a bit. You've worked on a number of things here, especially on the main stage. And so you've had the opportunity to work with a number of those actors more than once, the adult actors specifically. So can you talk to me about working with the adults, Peter and Kate and Patricia, who you've worked with more than once as well, Bill McNulty?
Very different from working with kids. You get treated differently, but not in a bad way. There's no bad treatment, but it's very different. You act more mature around the adults, and I feel like it's easier to get work done a little bit. But it's definitely an interesting experience that I much very much enjoy.
Sure. And Maureen, if you wanted to shout out to the adult members of the cast, who are of course not on here today, but a number of our ensemble were in there.
They're just wonderful. A day couldn't be better than when Peter Thomason is in the room for me. Vicki Boyle was on that, Patricia it led. So those three guys I knew. Bill I met on that show, and Kate I met on that show. And all the adults were great, and I think that they were very open to the fact that we were going to have young people there, and that was different. We did something on the first day that the whole ensemble of kids came in. We had a morning where we just talked about what's different from doing conservatory shows and doing adult shows. That adults don't necessarily want to hug just before the show, or they don't necessarily want to talk to you. They maybe want to be quiet. It doesn't mean that I like you. So that's a different thing. I mean, having been in youth theater and done youth theater, I understand that kind of camaraderie works in a different way, which for adults may happen after the show. And then we also did a thing where we had all of the kids get a chance to use the goggles and move around the room and see what was happening and what Liza was being asked to do, what Betsy was being asked to do. So we spent a time that I felt was well invested, and then Betsy joined us first, and then the other adults, because she was going to have interactions with them. So I think that that was very helpful to us. And you know, again, I feel like if you take kids into your particularly at a regional theater like Florida Rep. I mean, on Broadway, maybe you're paying big cash, so you got to figure the kids come credit. But you have an obligation as an adult. We are, you know, to educate. And if we believe that theaters, you know, will last, and we want it to last, we need to educate our young and not traumatize them.
Yeah.
And that was one thing Betsy and I really agreed on. No trauma, no trauma, no drama.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would say that Maureen was great about, and especially with Miracle Worker, was Liza's schedule. And when you're working with adult actors that are usually, you know, used to doing a day that maybe starts at 10 a.m., they were sometimes waiting for the kids, all the kids, to get out of school. And that was different. And then Liza, you know, when we were doing the show, when she was physically doing the show, sometimes twice a day, you know, she wasn't off the stage until 11 o'clock at night, but had to be at school every morning to go to school, and we would leave by 7. So, I mean, it was a pretty rigorous. So Maureen was really great about not only dealing with the kids' schedules, but also making sure the adults were okay with that time shift, because it was different for them as well.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for that. We have a question from the panel from Lynn Felice, the Felice household. They ask, how did Liza adjust when the curtain went up? And I think when she played her character with the ability to hear and see, so without the ability to hear and see. So if you can talk a bit about, and Maureen, if you want to join on this too, but Liza, how much discipline did it take for you in rehearsal and in performance to really keep in that, so that you making it believable that you couldn't see or hear anything? So if you could talk a bit about that process.
It took a lot of self-control. Before every show, I just tried to clear my mind of anything I was thinking about. And even if something like bad happened at school that day, I really just had to clear my mind from everything except the show. The show was my main priority during that time. And it was great having a lot of support, with my family, all my friends, and the cast, the entire cast of the movie. And Maureen especially. She's so understanding with all of our schedules. It was amazing.
I think that they really caught Liza, I would say, Jason, you caught her at a really good age to put her in a show, because we were even talking this morning or yesterday. I said, would you do this if you were given the opportunity now at 13? And she said, oh my gosh, no. Because she did not have a lot of inhibitions at that age, but that was such a narrow window of getting this performance out of her. Because if it would have been a year later, I think she would have been too concerned about her appearance or acting a certain way in front of her peers, or, we're just going through a total adolescent shift into, oh my gosh, I don't want to do that in front of everybody.
Sure.
He didn't have any of that then. So I think that was really good on Florida Rep to capture that age.
Sure. And
before.
yeah, Maureen, did you want to say something about
One thing I want to say about this is that I think there is for actors, there is always that split. You are within your character, and yet you do need to be aware that you're on a stage so you don't fall off of it, or that you're listening to the cues. But I think particularly, and this is very metacognitive, which is that she has to split from listening for cues, but finding the place in the touch or the feeling of the room, like in those dinner scenes, that she's not hearing them or seeing them. So how is she sensing what's going on? So she has to, speaking for her, Betsy too, that idea of that split between the piece of you that has to stay present, the piece of you as the actor, at the same time that you're completely invested in the character. And I think it's something that those of us who perform love that balance, but it's particularly weighted in this. Like the seesaw is way up for having to deal with the sensory deprivation at the same time. So you have to, reduce those skills. So I think it's a really, that's why it's a play that people love to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And Betsy, if you would talk a bit about this.
Do you agree?
Betsy, if you would talk a bit about the sign language. Lynn also asked, did you use real sign language? So if you could tell us a bit about the alphabet that Annie has to learn, how was it learning that? And I remember you bringing it beautifully to the audition room. And then where were they in the evolution of sign language?
Sure. So we did use real sign language in the play. The signs that are used in the play, it's just the sign language alphabet. It's all finger spelling. So, I would be spelling into Liza as Helen's hand. You're spelling like water. But you have to do that into a hand, so it's not necessarily visible to the audience in the same way that if you watch someone interpret signed performance, you can see everything that they do. But the audience didn't often actually see the letters that I was making because I was making them into Liza's palm, and she had to feel them. Or I would hold a letter up like this, and she would feel the whole thing. She would understand what the hand shape is. But that was one of the things that we talked a lot about, is sign language is a visual language as we understand it in the deaf community. And so how does that translate to somebody who isn't getting it visually but is getting it completely through touch? But yeah, I I had taken some sign language classes at the Sign Language Center in New York City, which is run entirely by deaf and hard of hearing people. And so all of the instructors there are fluent in sign language and teach class in sign language with like a whiteboard, which it's a great organization. And I've always loved, if I'm ever at something that's being interpreted, my eye always goes to the person who's signing. It's a gorgeous language, and the way that it, you know a lot of sign language more than you think, and it's also very expressive. So it's fun. It's a language that actors have easier access to than some people who haven't been raised to use it as their primary mode of communication. But yeah, I've been so grateful to have so many opportunities to learn more about sign and to use it for this play.
And Liza with Annie and also with Keenan, I think. Liza's a bit of a germaphobe, but she had to like literally stick her hand in people's mouths on stage and touch their faces. And so I remember there was a lot of that going on.
Well, I'm glad we got this play done before the current climate, because it might be a while before anyone's able to do a full.
Although we were in the middle of flu season. We were in the middle of a terrible flu season.
That's right.
So it was like every break was like everybody's wash their hands. We were in training with this.
Right. Yeah.
So it was like wash your hands, sanitize.
Just a reminder to our panel.
I'd like to share.
Yeah, go ahead.
Something happened for me that I'm very grateful for, and I just wanted to share it because it was another special Florida rep moment. When Mike came in to watch Liza and watch the performance between Helen and Liza, he was from Lighthouse, and he said to me, how did you get interested in this? And I said, my sister is, teacher of visually impaired and a mobility trainer. And he said, really, where? And I said, in Chicago. And he said, what's her name? And I said, and she had passed just the year before. She had died. And he said, what's her name? And I said, Peggy Madeira. And he said, she was my teacher. He said, I think of her every day because she was, and that she taught him that every child can learn, and it's the responsibility of the adults around them to make that possible. And so that was such a gift. It was like a message from my sister.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And
very grateful.
Yeah, and I'll take this moment to mention again Chippendale Audiology, who helped us with this production and who helped us with our hearing assist system in the theater. You mentioned Lighthouse, and they've been working with us for years now. Lighthouse of Southwest Florida is a nationally accredited non-profit agency which provides a variety of vision and rehabilitation and support services to babies, children, teens, adults, and their families who are experiencing major vision loss and blindness. And all of their programs and services here in Southwest Florida are free and cover all ages from newborn to those in their golden years. Classes include safe cooking, Braille orientation and mobility, technology using iPhones, art, ballroom dance, and more. So I wanted to shout out to them, and of course to the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Center here in Southwest Florida, who have been working with us for years, going back as far as tribes, and they were with us on this production as well, and they still continue to work with us. So we appreciate all of that support. Any final questions from our Zoom panel or on Facebook? You can put the comment in the question in the comment feed of the chat window. We're nearing the end of our hour. We're a little over, so I wanted to open it up for final thoughts from the panel, from Betsy, from Liza, from Maureen and Greg. If you have any final thoughts you want to leave with us. Liza, I would love to know, in closing from you, what did this experience teach you? How did this experience apply in ways that you might not have expected, that you might not have known back then, but you've taken since then?
It taught me that if I want to do something, like I can just do it. I don't even know how to say it. It's hard to say, but I did not think I was capable of doing this. But with the work we put into it, and Maureen and my dad and everybody, is really cool.
Excellent. Thank you, Liza. Betsy, any final thoughts for our audience today?
I just want to say it's really lovely to revisit, to spend time with all of you guys and to revisit this play. I had such a great experience being at Florida Rep, particularly in the wintertime. It's great. Who's usually spending winters in New York to get to escape and do what I love. So that was a gift, and to be able to revisit that a little bit from my parents' house in Ohio is really a highlight of my day. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Greg, any final thoughts?
No, I just would like to say that I think that this was such a beautiful production, so beautifully realized, and I still run into people at Costco and other places around town who will come up to and talk about the performance and how beautiful this play was, and how they were so moved by this production. And as we all know, it takes a village, right? It takes the whole team, and firing on all cylinders, and that's part of the beauty of theater. It's once everybody gets everything sorted out, then the audience becomes part of that team. They're like the last ingredient, right? That's added to the mix. And I saw so many of these performances because I would be there to pick up Liza often at the end of the night, and I would watch it again and again and again, most of the end of the play, and it was breathtaking. Each and every night, it was breathtaking, and I don't think it's just because my kid was in it. I think it was just a really well done piece of theater, and I think that all of you on the panel, and I mean everybody, you should all be very, very proud of the work.
Thank you so much, Greg. Maureen, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah. As I said, Florida Rep is a place I consider an artistic home, and I would love to come home soon. So I hope that things go well and people are able to be on these places. And I thank the audience and the theaters who help make it possible. Keep showing up. We love to make art, and you make the circle complete, as Greg said. So thank you. And thank you, Jason, for inviting us.
Oh, of course. Liza, Liz, anything from you? Final thoughts?
No, it was, for I think for Greg and I as parents, it was pretty unbelievable. I know when we saw it, we did not watch a lot. I did not see any of the rehearsal process. So sitting down, I know with my parents and seeing what they had worked on as a team, and how they had constructed this incredible show was pretty magnificent, because I was just in charge of making sure she had food and a tutor and going to bed at night. That was my job, and seeing where her relationship went with Betsy, and how Betsy really nurtured a relationship, but also stayed back enough so that they were still able to combat one another on stage. That was very apparent. It was truly incredible. It was pretty incredible.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so very much for joining us for our 10th week of Stage at Home. So let's have one more virtual round of applause for our panelists. Thank you all so much for spending your Friday afternoon with us. I also wanted to take a moment to shout out Florida Rep staff. As we navigate these waters of closures and interrupted ticket revenue, the theaters had to make a lot of tough decisions. We were very fortunate here at Florida Rep to receive funding from the Small Business Administration's Payroll Protection Program, so we were able to keep a number of our staff employed for 2 months longer than would otherwise have been possible. But today marks the last day of work for a number of incredibly qualified, dedicated, and gifted theater professionals across all departments. So I'd like to ask all of you to help me in thanking them for their years of service in many cases. We make this promise to all of them. This is temporary. We will get through this, and we will see you back here in the scene shop, in the offices, and on our stages. So thank you to all of our staff. Thank you so much. To our Stage at Home viewers, a reminder that past Stage at Home talkbacks are all available on Florida Rep's YouTube and Facebook pages. And we're now free podcast, as I've been saying for weeks, on Spotify, Google Playlist, Anchor Breaker, and Radio Public. And we hope to see you next week for an in-depth discussion with members of the cast and creative team for this season's NNPN Rolling World premiere of Alabaster by Audrey Cephaly. We'll have a discussion with the actress and folk artist Sarah Morsi about how she approached creating over 50 pieces of art for that play. We'll also speak to the costume designer Charlene Gross and our costume intern and technician Andrew Burns and ensemble actress Rachel Bertram about the process behind designing the scars and applying the prosthetics night after night. So this is a discussion not to miss next week. To sign up for next week or for updates about anything else at Florida Rep Stage at Home, please follow us on Facebook. Make sure you're on our email list or visit the news and events page at floridarep.org. And again, thank you all for spending the afternoon with us. And while we can't yet gather in the theater, we will see you there soon. So from all of us at Florida Rep, have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so very much. Thank you.